So how's it going for the respecting the 14 days delay for the ones that have applied on day one?
So good, but if you don't, and I will answer that question if you don't mind, there's a couple things I want to share with you guys. So we've had a really busy week with immigration, and there's a few major things I wanted to bring you up on. We haven't necessarily dressed it up with formal announcements, but there's a couple of pretty big milestones that we've hit on Ukraine, on Afghanistan, and more broadly on the processing of immigration cases, which I know has been an issue outside of these humanitarian crises. I do just want to say, yesterday I had an extraordinary experience that is going to stick with me for a very long time. I was on hand at Pearson International Airport where we welcomed a cohort of nearly 300 Afghan refugees who've come through Tajikistan. And what makes this particular cohort notable, other than the journey they've been through, is we now have more than 10,000 Afghan refugees who've landed in Canada and are safe here. One of the things that really had the importance of this sink home for me was the fact that I live in a town that has a little less than 10,000 people. To think that the town of New Glasgow now has been replicated across Canada with people who've given a second lease on life is an extraordinary thing. And when I saw families coming down with children who were the same age as my own kids, I got a 6-year-old at home, I got a little guy who's about to turn 9 months old, to see families coming down the steps of this airplane saying thank you to Canada gives me faith that we're doing something that is worth doing, and gives me faith that we're on the right track. On Ukraine, and thank you for the question, a couple of updates that I wanted to share with everybody. Before I get into the numbers, there's a few specific things that have taken place this week that I think are really important around settlement supports and around biometrics, both the rules and the resources that are in the region. So on biometrics, I wanted to let folks know that we've been moving additional supports into the region to follow migration patterns. We're seeing more volumes in certain areas and are setting up new teams with new units. We're working with provinces and territories that are talking about setting up presences on the ground to further facilitate the Canadian effort. We've seen in the past seven days, 12,000 biometrics appointments completed in Europe right now. One of the things that's both challenging but in a lot of ways working well is that when we do see an influx of people who are showing up in Warsaw, we're able to move more people and more biometrics kits into Warsaw. When we see now the second busiest location in the last couple of days is Berlin, which didn't necessarily jive with what we expected to see, we're able to now move additional people and biometrics units to Berlin. We've got additional resources landing in Bucharest and Bratislava and Vienna and Warsaw and Berlin and elsewhere across Europe to continue to have the flexibility to move both the people and the equipment to these different locations. It gives us the ability to process literally in excess of 10,000 people in a week. On the biometrics requirements, we've been working with folks who know something about security. What we've realized is there's certain low-risk cohorts that we are now eliminating for certain individuals that don't have other flags on their files, for example, that won't be required to do biometrics anymore. Children under 14 didn't need them to begin with. We're expanding that to kids from 14 to 17. We're expanding that to people over the age of 60 years old. And we're expanding that to folks who have a history of travel to Canada as well, that have followed the rules while they were here. Finally, I did want to share some news that doesn't touch on some of the humanitarian crises that we're dealing with. It's been something I've received questions about in the House of Commons previously. We put a lot of resources over the last number of months, and both before and after my appointment, into boosting the processing capacity of IRCC. We've added more than 500 staff. We've invested in the economic and fiscal update $85 million towards 5 different temporary lines of business. And we've seen new functionalities come online for the new modern and digital platform. They're starting to pay dividends. We've now seen more than 108,000 permanent residency approvals in this calendar year, which puts us on pace to meet our goal of 432,000 for the year, which I'd remind you is the largest target that we've ever set in the history of Canada for new permanent residents. Second, I committed in my announcement on January 31st to by the end of March, hit 147,000 decisions by the end of March. We surpassed that goal about a week ago. So the processing capacity, despite the fact that we're responding to these humanitarian crises, is actually exceeding a little bit the targets that we have set for ourselves before we had to launch the response to Ukraine. More specifically, finally, to your very specific question, how are things going with that first group? 2 weeks ago, when I was in self-isolation in a hotel room, we shared details of the, I think I may have been out by then actually. We announced that the new Canada-Ukraine authorization for emergency travel was up and running, and that we estimated it was going to be a 2-week period to see the first batch of approvals. There have now been in excess of 12,000 approvals under this new system. That's in addition to the 7,500 or so approvals that took place for people who applied for a temporary residency visa that came in sort of from the beginning of the year up until March 17th. There are now more than 20,000 approvals across the expedited consideration of the ordinary TRV and the new authorization for emergency travel. What it says to me is, despite the fact that the situation on the ground is challenging when you have 4 million people who fled a war zone, we have seen a significant number of applications come in, but we're actually doing a little bit better than meeting the standard that we set for ourselves 2 weeks ago when we launched this program. So the system seems to be holding up well, and we're seeing large numbers of people not just get processed and approved, but that have actually also been arriving in Canada. So I'll leave my comments there, and happy to take.
So what's the latest figure on the number of applicants, Ukrainians, and what about the negotiations about chartering flights? Is that still ongoing with the airlines?
Sure. So there's lots of conversations going on. So we have, the last number I saw earlier this week was in excess of 65,000 applications. Of course, not all of those came in on day one, I think you could appreciate. And it's still the 2-week processing period that we expect that we'll be able to meet. With respect to the transportation options, there are still things that we're working on. Our immediate priority was to get people here as quickly as possible, get them permission to get here as quickly as possible, make sure that we have supports in place so they do well when they arrive. We're continuing to have conversations, not just with airlines, but with community organizations to figure out how we can support them when we get here and actually facilitate their entry into Canada as well. There's been some conversations that are purely on the government side, but I would point out as well that we've had some early signs of success working with private individuals or organizations who've been advancing the arrivals of certain groups coming from Ukraine. I'd point in particular, and just a huge thank you to everybody involved with a cause that's very close to my own heart, with the Sick Kids Hospital and the pediatric cancer patients that are now receiving the care they need in Canada. We're going to continue to work with that group. We also had
back to chartering flights. I mean, Transat notably said we've done that before the Syrians. We're ready to do it again.
Yeah, and we're in conversations with Air Transat, with Air Canada, with all of the airlines, and with LOT Airlines, who actually brought a private charter of people who came back just to Alberta. So these conversations are ongoing. I don't have a major announcement to make today about specific dates and times. These conversations are evolving in addition to a number of other measures that we're going to continue to look at to support people in getting here and when they arrive. I think you can appreciate, when I think of an ordinary refugee resettlement effort, the people that I met at Pearson yesterday, the 300 people who arrived, they've been living in Tajikistan for between 3 and 5 years in most instances. Our ordinary refugee resettlement process takes many years because we're not only focused on getting people here, but getting them here when the communities have the capacity to deal with them. One of the unique challenges that we've run into, that we've not really had an opportunity in 35 seconds in question period to address, when you're dealing with a charter from a refugee camp, for example, you have thousands of people who've potentially been approved to come to Canada already that are waiting for a flight. What we're seeing right now is the movement of people across Europe is unpredictable and based on where people can find safety for sometimes a few days at a time. So a lot of the people who are approved to come to Canada, they may have done their biometrics in Warsaw, but they quickly make their way west to wherever they can be safe. So we don't necessarily have hundreds or thousands of people sitting waiting for a plane to arrive yet. We're working right now to identify the best way to ensure that we can identify where the people are, not just who they are, so we can facilitate their travel. But one of the things that's really, really important, every signal that we're seeing is large numbers of people are getting to Canada. Earlier this week, the numbers that I saw was since the beginning of the year, there's over 12,000 people who are in Canada now. Now that we're seeing this first tranche of approvals with another 12,000 under this expedited program, I anticipate we're going to see more arrivals as well. So the conversation about arranging flights is still ongoing, but because of some of the challenges that I just mentioned, there's still a little bit of work to do.
About the hunger strike happening outside. This is the second time that these former Afghan interpreters are out there on a hunger strike. Are you going to meet with them, and what's your message to them who say that they've been waiting for their families to come for months and months with nothing from us?
So I've had an opportunity to meet with them previously. They're in touch with our office virtually every week. If we need to have another conversation, of course, I would be open to that. My message to them is that I understand how heartbreaking it is to be separated from family members. To see people living through not just the devastation of their homeland, but to be torn apart from their families is the kind of thing that, if you're human, you have to be able to empathize. The reason that we actually set up a special stream we launched in December for the extended family members of previously resettled interpreters is because we want to reunite them with their families. The challenges in each individual case are extraordinary. In addition to the challenges that we see for people who are in Afghanistan, for example, there's a group of people who have already made it to Pakistan. In order to satisfy the exit requirements in Pakistan in many instances, they're required to get a valid Afghanistan passport, which can only be issued by the Taliban. There are circumstances that are not within the control of the Government of Canada that we will work very hard to overcome. Despite the extraordinary nature of these logistical challenges, we're not wavering in our commitment to do what we can to make good on the promise to bring people here under this special stream that we've created specifically to accommodate their requests.
They're saying Canada told them to go to a third country. Canada told them to go to Pakistan, and now they're stuck there.
And we, of course, we don't want people who are vulnerable at the hands of the Taliban to be facing persecution at the hands of the Taliban. I think you'll understand that there may be requirements in different countries around the world about the exit control. And frankly, for some people who entered with status or without status who have made their way into Pakistan, and this is not unique specifically to this particular group, but for others who've done the same thing, the challenges that one individual may face in Pakistan may not be the same as another. So we're trying to work with partners in the region to do whatever we can to facilitate the arrival of people into Canada. It's the whole reason we created the special program. I know that these people are struggling. We want to help them, and we're going to do whatever we can to.
How long is it going to take you to get all the people from Afghanistan who want to come to Canada, to get them to Canada? How long is that going to take?
Well, look, let me just answer your question in a very specific way. All the people who want to come to Canada, if I'm being completely frank, and I always hope to, we've had more than 1 million people submit some kind of a communication to the Government of Canada saying they would like to come here. Not everybody who would like to come to Canada is eligible, because we've said we made a commitment to people who made a significant and enduring contribution to Canada. We've made a commitment to bring a significant number of people who are being persecuted for the work in building a democracy, women leaders. We're made a commitment to journalists, to members of the LGBTQ2+ community. The reality is we made one of the most substantial commitments globally to say we're going to have 40,000 come here. We expect we're still on track to hit that goal next year of at least 40,000. But the reality is there's going to be some people amongst the 1 million communications that the department's received that may not end up living in Canada one day. But we want to do whatever we can to make one of the most significant contributions to this effort, because we believe we have a moral obligation to those who helped Canada, and we also want to do our part on the world stage as part of the humanitarian effort.
The 40,000, then, how long is that going to take?
We're still well on track to meet that target for next year. I don't have a specific date within next year to announce with you today, but just to put it into perspective, in a given month, we're starting to see, it's pretty routine to see one significant plane on a weekly basis appears to be arriving. It's common that we'll exceed 1,000 or so people in any given month. We're now at over 10,000, so at the current pace, we're certainly going to hit it next year. To the extent that we can find ways to expedite it and we can work with settlement agencies to ensure people succeed, of course we'd look to do that.
Can you confirm, like for Ukrainian refugees that have applied for the 2 new streams that you put in place, like that basically came into effect 2 weeks ago, how many of these people that have applied for these 2 streams are already in Canada? Are there some that have arrived here?
Yes, but I don't have the specific number by program as who's arrived. So in total, the number that I have. I would have to get you that answer on the back end. We could find that number for you quite easily, but right now I've come down here with the number of approvals on my mind. But I'd be happy if you want to send a follow-up to try to get you whatever data.
Some people have arrived here who applied, like, in the program 2 weeks ago.
No. Just to be clear, the people I'm talking about to approve applications. So the people that I'm saying have arrived would include people who submitted an application for a TRV that we were processing on an expedited basis, or people who potentially had status and ability to come to Canada before the new program. The new approvals are, it's 2 weeks now from day one of that program. There's been 12,000 people approved. We don't yet see arrivals because these approvals are really, really fresh.
How long does it take between the approval and the time they can come here?
In theory, they could be on a plane immediately. One of the things that we're hearing on the ground right now when I talk to people who are in the region is that there's a lot of people who are submitting applications but aren't necessarily making the decision to travel right away. I think you can appreciate, a lot of people want to go home. A lot of people want to go home. They're hoping that Ukraine is going to win this war in a potentially short period of time. They've taken out an insurance policy on the basis of their ability to enter Canada. My hope is that we can provide them with safe haven, but I would love it if they don't have to come. We will welcome them with open arms if they choose to. Their hope is that they can return home very soon, and time will tell whether that's going to remain an opportunity for them.
From the 12,000, from this first tranche, how many, do you think are waiting for a charter flight to come here?
I don't have information on that, and I prefer not to speculate. I think it's a dangerous game that you get into. It's a challenging thing because we built a program not based on allocations as we do with a refugee resettlement program, because we wanted to stand this up as quickly as possible. And when you're dealing with a demand-driven program, you're also dealing with uncertainties as to when people arrive or what they may be thinking, because we're not dealing with people who've been sitting in a refugee situation, who've been having conversations with the UNHCR for 3 years waiting to come. So we don't have an understanding yet of how many come. And those who may not be thinking it now, if the opportunity became available, they may start to think about it. So there's human psychology is a very difficult thing to predict when you're dealing with another person's mindset. So it's uncertain for those reasons. It looks like we're getting well into the SO31, so I should probably not be late in case they ask me a question. Really appreciate everybody's time. We'll see you again.